What is up there, Workforce? Chris here with Work to Game, and I want to go back through the live letter real quick because I didn't get a chance to react or elaborate on anything when I did it before. So this is literally just going to be the reaction piece to my summary. So let's go ahead and dive in. So first, they say that there are 6 massive new areas. Having now been in these areas, I can say that they feel enormous, they feel beautiful, they are astounding. They may be my favorite Final Fantasy XIV zones yet, and I am blown away by the chance to get out there and fight just these crazy, beautiful looking mobs and try all these awesome looking fates. And it's just really exciting to see the world be something worth exploring. A new city, the Crystarium. The city is beautiful. It's just every part of it is breathtaking. It excites me more than any main city that we've had so far. Maybe the originals did that for me. So if you could talk about maybe like an Ul'dah and like a Lemza without the load screens between the different areas, that's about how big and just immersive this feels to me. It's not so big that you're going to spend all this time running from place to place. They did a good job of kind of keeping what looks like it'll be future NPCs. They had a lot of that kind of blocked off, and they had like weird names and shop things all to kind of hide any chance for us to start dissecting lore or future content cycles. Anything that was not intended to be. The media tour build was not only cut off at April 30th, but they also had anything dealing with MSQ masked off by just having weird names on things and stuff like that. So it's hard to know for sure, but the Crystarium feels like it's going to be a really cool home, and I really look forward to seeing what the new housing districts look like, if they add those, when they add those, whatever that ends up being. The 2 new jobs, Gunbreaker and Dancer, both feel fantastic. The Dancer shocked me. I really wanted it to be a healer, but I had a ton of fun bouncing around. I've never really gotten into any of the physical DPSs, range DPSs in this game, but I have to say Machinist was really fun. I didn't get a chance to play Bard, and Dancer just blew me away. I didn't really totally understand when I should be shifting dances and stuff, so I'm sure I was doing it wrong, but I look forward to diving into that complexity and getting a feel for that job. Gunbreaker felt totally natural. It's a lot of buttons, so I will say to you controller players out there, or anybody who doesn't like very complex rotations, it felt much more complex than something like Warrior, which is what I'm familiar with. Warrior just felt like a continuation of the same thing. Totally at home right from the get-go, except for the fact that I was on a foreign machine, so my keybinds were out of place and stuff, but it was fine. They did adjust the level cap to 80 on everything. We got level 80 characters. We were handed gear and all of that, and then a big stack of Eureka potions so that I could go in and create my Hrothgar and my Viera. The battle system changes across the board were exciting. It was neat to try out the different kind of pacing to things. The role actions didn't feel as overwhelming because there's not as many of them now, and we knew that there were going to be changes coming. Machinist feels like a total overhaul. The healing felt great. I enjoyed it. I'm not a main healer in this game, so I look forward to kind of hearing from members of the community that were at the media tour that are main healers. Tanking felt really natural. I was a little concerned at how casual it was, but the tank classes themselves were fun to play. I just worry that it might feel flat, that I don't have the immunity rotation. We're not huge melee DPS players, me and Brian, but I did enjoy kind of watching the people in the room that do like melee DPS, having a lot of fun on those. I didn't really hear anybody doing a lot of complaining about any one job. There were some people kind of concerned about like how is this job going to feel once it's in, let's say, 8-man content, Savage content. So there were definitely questions in the room, but I don't know that there's anything to be answered there, at least to the people I visited with. But you know, there were plenty of people in the room, not only when I was there, but there was multiple days and multiple creators. So I encourage you to go out there and find all those other opinions. UHP gave 37 interviews, so that means there's at least 37 different kind of outlets, for lack of a better term, that will all have opinions on this and got a chance to play exactly what we did, which was, I don't know, it was like almost 8 hours of game time. So basically as much as you could sit there and just churn through. Like, I don't think I saw Mistech get up once. She basically sat there at her computer, ate at her computer, and was just playing a ton. So I look forward to kind of seeing people like that's responses to all of this. It was exciting. Larry Czar was sitting directly behind me, and it was exciting to kind of hear him getting into everything. We were in stations of 4, and so I was there at a table with Avalon Star and Spofi, and so it was I had a ton of fun enjoying these battle system changes. So to move on, new playable races, Hrothgar and Viera. both very, very cool. If I didn't have such an aversion to changing a character once I've built them and played them for years, if I create yet another character, I've already started kind of playing through the story again on Alala. It's going to be a tough call between Viera and Hrothgar. They are both stunning, absolutely ridiculously awesome. I cannot wait to see what people do with these, and I look forward to having the variety in the world. The trust system, they are slower than the players. They said that was meant to be, just like they said the battle class system, while it was meant to make it to where like no one class would be avoidable in content, that a better player would now be the focus. I've seen WoW kind of go back and forth on that pendulum, and it's had more expansions, so it'll be interesting to see how 14 kind of navigates that in their own way, seeking out their own form of balance that I trust them to do a good job on. They've done a good job so far, and so it'll be interesting to see kind of how this trust system plays in overall, but it worked right out of the gate. The fact that it worked on an April 30th build for us, it had a couple of little, weird behaviors, but hopefully those will kind of get patched out. Nothing that I was really too concerned about. New beast tribes, we could kind of see evidence of these out in the world, but everything, like I said, was masked off. New powerful foes, Titania, which it does sound like that's what they want them to be able to fight middle of June when we talk about E3, so it'll be nice to see those players. Hopefully they'll be able to capture some footage and kind of show us a little bit of that fight. The world visit system is going to be a huge thing with the amount of open world content that we can have, like fate parties on community game night and stuff like that. Should be super fun. End of 32-bit support, I assume, is what led to the world being so beautiful, so powerful. All these new jobs, just it all felt really good. New support for 64-bit Mac is something I'm really excited about. As somebody who has switched over the years between Mac and PlayStation, it would be really nice for my Mac to be supported. At some point I will probably own a gaming PC now that YouTube's such a big part of my life, and that this game historically has run very well on PC of the three, and so it will probably be where I end up, but especially because Brian and I have had a few other invites to play different demos and things like that, and they've always been tied to PC. But it was awesome to see Mac get supported. I think I was the only person in the room. I let out like an audible cheer and all that, and they pulled me aside later and said that Yoshi P was really excited to see that because it took a lot of work, and I guess that all the other outlets, that there weren't that many other Mac players in the room, or that there were, just journalists in the room going, all right. And so I think that he was very excited to kind of see somebody just excited about something that I'm sure was a real headache. The new fate system. Brian and I went off and ground these until we could get one of the riding maps, and it didn't take long at all. I look forward to kind of seeing what the different kind of crafting ingredients are used for. Hopefully there's some cool companions and things locked behind this and all that. They said that there will be rewards added down the road, so we'll just have to see what they kind of lock that behind, but I thought it was an awesome way to breathe life out into the world. The side quests being scalable I think is brilliant, because it's great that they can use these for the leveling of multiple jobs, and this will kind of help, having scalable enemies, having scalable just helps you from feeling like you're being suboptimal and you want to get out in the world and see everything it has to offer. And this will be for all 5.0 side quests, and I assume any expansion moving forward after this, since after all 6.0 confirmed. Role quests. This is something I'm really excited about, because when we talk about like Hall of the Novice, that's great, but now at level cap we don't really do a good job of teaching people how to be these different roles. It did say physical DPS, magical DPS, tank, and healer. I'm wondering if they meant melee and ranged, but we'll just have to see how that plays out. I do think that that's going to be something that helps them kind of have a place that if they want to put in a way to make you a better tank or a better healer, that seems like an obvious place to insert something like that, that's specifically geared around the content of that expansion. And then the next expansion, if the way tanking and healing has been done has changed, then you can just tie that into new role quests, because one of the role quests is required to be completed to move on to the main scenario, so you do have to at least be decent at one of the roles, and then they encourage you to go back and play through all the roles, because they're saying that they're going to lock all this really neat aspects to the story, and hopefully would kind of maybe give you like some form of an achievement with a title or something if you complete all four, to encourage you to have that perspective of what Shadowbringers battle content is meant to be and what the lore behind this expansion is meant to be. Gathering and crafting quests, they did say that gathering and crafting is going to be a big piece of the E3 announcements. So anything that was not asked in an interview question here, or was too specific in an interview question, got pushed to E3. and we didn't get a chance to see any crafters or gatherers. That seems like something that they're kind of pacing themselves because they know they've got a month to kind of continue to get us so hyped that we're almost worn out. And so they did say that there were the 5 new types of quests. These stories would be centered in the Crystarium, that big, beautiful new city that we have, and that we would be kind of grouping things, just like role quests. So we would have Disciples of Hand, have the forging, crafting, and nourishment, and then we'd have land as basically gathering and fishing, which is how I do my guides, because that's how it plays out now. Botanist and Miner feel pretty identical to me, and then fishing is very much its own thing. And that this will kind of encourage us to explore more lore and stuff like that. The UI felt better. I didn't spend a ton of time customizing my UI, but the fact that they're adding the new skins and the new themes I think is very cool. One of the things, because this game doesn't support add-ons, that I always really struggle with is that even though one of our interview questions went over API, which is why I didn't elaborate on this before because I was just having trouble not saying that, this tells me that maybe we don't need an API to get the UI needs, that if you just want different cosmetics, maybe that's something that we can just kind of show them and request. So if somebody can kind of mock those up, get it on Reddit, maybe we can all thumbs it up enough that they see it and they actually roll that out, because they said they do want new themes to be regular additions. The dropping the boss down to 1%, we were actually sitting in the room pulling things as a fight, and it was really cool to say 1%, 0.9, 0.8, 0.7, and counting all the way down until that final boss died. Adding more crossworld link shells makes sense. Party list information to it just overall, I was really impressed with the number of UI things. The party list information to be updated, I don't know exactly what they were talking about here, but I will say that so I don't really have a whole lot to elaborate on that, but I do know that the housing furnishing placement to be preview to be added is a really cool feature. They said and more, so we'll just have to kind of see what all that looks like when we get the patch notes. That typically has even more information, so not only look forward to when we talk about E3 coverage, but we're gonna get another round of coverage when we talk about the patch notes right before Shadowbringers goes live here. So the charged action system, this felt so good. It felt so natural. You have a dash ability on the dancer. They actually showed it, and you felt like you could just dash in and then dash out. You actually have a third dash in case you kind of screw that up. And so I noticed it on a handful of kind of abilities. There are multiple classes that take advantage of it. It is something that I think was a really neat way to kind of give you the ability to not feel like you had to, like when a boss pushed a phase, if, say there's a boss down the line that goes into talking or something like that, you're just continuing to build that up, and it really made it feel like if there was something that had to get burned down, that you could shift to it and you could just really do whatever you needed to do to focus on that. So I could be wherever I needed to be as a dancer because that dash ability had built up. So I really liked it. I was very impressed with how simple of a change that was and how much of a difference it made. The silence, I didn't really see that much use of it, but we had very limited access to the new zones and stuff like that. But the roll actions did feel good. When I went to drag things onto my bars, there were a lot less buttons on my bars just in general from job to job to job as I played multiple jobs, but it didn't feel like I didn't have stuff to do, so it still felt pretty natural. I didn't feel like anything had gotten stripped down, and yet they've clearly removed things or simplified things in the game. The TP-MP change I think overall will be very good, but there are going to be some growing pains. You now basically can do the math on how many abilities you have in a fight, knowing that here's your regen rate, exactly kind of when you would be out of mana, and so it's really going to encourage people to kind of understand their full rotation, understand skill priority and things like that, because you can't just stack up the MP to just counteract poor use of MP. So hopefully this will help healers really start to understand the importance of not overhealing, because one of the old theories with overhealing, one of the problems is that it's not only a waste of mana, but it's also something that generates a lot of enmity. But with the new tank change, I don't think there's any way a healer's ripping off a tank, and so really the issue here with overhealing is that you're wasting mana. And so it'll be interesting to kind of see how that gets tuned, because we obviously only got access to so much content. with Materia, we didn't have any real need for gear. We were handed full sets of gear for every class, so you just switched gear set and it was all waiting for you. So I don't really have any opinions on that. Whatever they want to do with Materia, I understand that they're trying to make it to where there's a little bit of customization, but not too much customization, and they've tried that with different things like attribute points and Materia changes and all that. I would be interested to see if they end up going up to a Materia 7 or Materia 8, or kind of how high they end up driving that. I don't know. We'll just have to see. Weekly token gear as well as Savage accessories will have 2 Materia slots is an interesting way. It does seem like they're trying to blur that line between crafted and dungeon gear, at least at kind of the casual level. I would still expect, your Savage and any like ultimate or anything like that, I would expect any gear there to kind of be that best. But it just seems like they're starting to say, hey, let's start to make these things more relatable, so that there isn't that kind of, that can't be the distinguishing thing. It just seems like their goal isn't to make the number of Materia slots what distinguishes. It should just be the number of stats on the piece. So if you can craft a certain eye level, that should be identical. In my mind, that feels like that should be identical to the same eye level out of a dungeon. And number of Materia slots, I don't know. Yeah. Pet system. This felt like a core rule change. So one of the things that I was really impressed with about all this stuff is that it felt like there were some core underlying technologies that changed, and so they may not feel good to you content-wise now, but just know that like as they roll out things like this, this is the kind of stuff that makes the game scalable and run long-term. So it felt like the pets really performed all on the same consistent set of, I guess, like core rules. And so my machinist pets, summoner pets, the Dark Knight, let's call him a pet, it felt like you really had very little control over them. They're going to do what they do, and you are just meant to be you. So that was my impression of it. That's what it felt like, and I think that allows them to kind of add more pets and things like that into the game. Maybe something like Beastmaster becomes possible under that kind of paradigm shift, where it's like the pet is really an extension of the player. You're playing the player, you're not playing the pet. And so you may cast something and the pet may respond in kind, but that you're not controlling the pet's mind, is really what it felt like to me. And so by removing the pet hotbar and things like that, I think that's going to really simplify the game to where if you're a summoner, you're a summoner. Like, you're not an Eggy. And so if the Eggy decides to do something in response to you, like, yeah, that's great. It's definitely in sync with you, but that you're very much you. And so I thought it felt really natural to me. It'll be interesting to see what players who play more traditional pet battle classes really play Summoner, or the people who now have Dark Knight and that little guy to swing with them, or the Machinist people with the big robot. It'll be interesting to kind of see what they think about the way those different things kind of behave, and if it just feels like something that's happening around you, or if it really does feel like an extension of you. I do think that condensing things like your Crimson Cyclone, Earth and Armor, Aerial / to one ability makes sense. There's no reason for, like, if it's one of the things that, like, I really like about the simplified PvP at a basic level. I like that, like, when I'm on a Black Mage, when I'm in my ice rotation, I like that there's kind of ice spells, and when I'm in my fire, there's fire spells. And so I like the idea that a button can have multiple uses, and then I'm not just tying that button up, and so it's like, oh well, once I've done this, like, for example, I wish that, like, if, let's just say, for example, that there was like a Thunder 1 and a Thunder 2, ignore the hypothetically, if there was ability 1 and ability 2, or like Red Mage, for example, you would have ability 1 and ability 2, and you're only going to use ability 2 when the proc is up. Well, I don't understand why that can't just be on ability 1, and I use ability 1 when it's that time in the rotation, unless the proc is up, and then I tap it an additional time. And so I don't understand why more buttons makes things more complex, and I do like that they seem to, ideally in my mind, it feels like they're putting themselves in a position where they can make the complexity of the content, which is something that every time we get new content, it's new, it's fresh, it's exciting. But the thing about getting a new class is that you only get that once every 2 years, and so I feel like putting the emphasis on the content will be a lot healthier for the game long term, and that feels like the direction that the battle system is headed. The stat squish kind of being announced roughly for 6.0 makes sense. It's coming up on time. Chain bonuses being removed from dungeons to standardized experience makes sense. The battle system calculations have been adjusted and changed. Keep in mind that all the numbers any streamer saw, anybody who's putting out stuff on how the new classes feel, including us here at Work to Game, we were playing an April 30th build specifically meant for us, and so any additional changes they were still messing with at the time, any changes they've messed with since then, they confirmed that they were going to continue to try to tweak things and perfect things until the day that it went live. And so I really just keep in mind your job cannot either be the greatest job of all time or the worst job of all time. Like nobody should be living or dying based on what we know. It's worth being excited about, it's worth going and understanding and getting a context for, but if you're worried whether your job got ruined or if your job's now at the top of the meta, there is no way to know that at this time. So additional battle system adjustments, adding the shield to the bars felt so good. It really looked natural. I think it's a little weird that it went above instead of being extended like to the right with maybe like dashes through it to show that it's beyond or something. But that's their own UI call, and I get it. So I'm glad that they did something. As we start to talk about rebalancing player roles, the synergies between jobs getting reduced, it was hard to see that in full effect because we had limited access to kind of, especially when you talk about 8-man content and stuff like that. We were running a low-level dungeon, mostly with trust, so you're running with a lot of the same classes over and over. When you're playing with other players, it's going to be hard to see that in full effect until we get a little more context. So come back in maybe July and we'll start to have a better feel for that. But as we talk about like debuffs being removed, action values being revised, extra actions that now are no longer needed being removed, and the synergy of the new dancer being emphasized, which I don't think anybody's mastered yet. So I think we'll have to kind of see exactly how that plays out. That's more of one of the slides that it's really, I appreciate them telling us, but until we have the content context, I think that it's a little early to call. The tank roles, tanks can be used to buff or enhance their defenses. Not shocking. Off tanks and main tanks will just have to see that toggle is on a cooldown long enough that if they wanted to have tank swapping and you didn't accidentally press it too many times, you could switch back and forth between having a toggle on and toggle off, but the job effectiveness will vary depending on player skill. Yeah, obviously. Tank role jobs, that the offensive, so talking about tank roles specifically, that the offensive stances were removed, I think is an interesting choice. That the tank stances, like, basically now you just toggle that thing on and you immediately have all of your entity that you need, and if you toggle it off, that's it. We get our mastery trait that reduces damage and stuff like that, so it feels like they could almost be even standardizing our gear with melee DPS. We'll have to see how that kind of plays out, but it really, in my mind, blurred the line between melee DPS and tanks. So I'm a little concerned about that, having gone hands-on. Healer role, I noticed a lot of people were really worried about this. I think that a lot of that in North America was because in the 90-minute presentation they gave us before our gameplay demo, it actually, in my mind, came across a little differently. Than he used a different set of words than he did in the live letter when I was listening to that. And so I think that it really made people focus a lot on the term pure healing role. I think what they're trying to say is that you're not a DPS with a faster Q, that you are a healer. And so a lot of that in my mind will show itself in the content design. Do they force you to do more healing or people die? Removing protect, I have mixed feelings. Like I think that there's some legitimacy to being concerned that the game is being eroded, that all these small changes will add up. But that on its own, it's a pretty empty change. It doesn't mean much to me. I do think there's something healthy to having like a set of actions that tell you you're ready for battle. So there's something to that kind of like to-do list, that checklist. Like, do I have food on? Do I have protect up and stuff? And they even talked about when the devs were running it, that sometimes they would just be standing around waiting for people to pull because they were used to like, okay, we get protected and we pull, and then they had to go, oh yeah, we removed that. So they added a lot of changes to healers. The 3 that they listed in the live letter were that the white mages received an instant heal to mitigate the cast times, that the spell head actions were revised, while direct heals and barriers were adjusted, and the astrologian stances and card effects will be adjusted. Honestly, astrologian sounded like across the board from people who usually play Astro. I was not an Astro main by any stretch of the imagination. I don't even think my Astro's at cap. So, you know, kind of listening around the room and stuff like that, I did try out the Astro. It felt good, and listening to everybody else, they kind of couldn't make heads or tails of the Astro changes right away. So hopefully everybody will be really happy with those. It sounds like they've at least made an effort to get the 3 healers as in line as they can and protect that identity, and I'm sure that we'll see some small battle tweaks as we talk about 5.1 and things like that when they really get the big numbers, since Final Fantasy is one of those games that doesn't do like a PTR per se. So DPS roles, there were certain jobs that stayed really more traditional: Monk, Dragoon, Ninja, Samurai, Black Mage, Red Mage. I played a little on my Black Mage. I know that, like, Brian played Red Mage, I think, and he played Monk, and he said that while there weren't significant changes, that they did feel better to him. I thought Black Mage felt largely the same. It wasn't a massive shift for me. Bard, Machinist, Summoner, on the other hand, felt substantially different. Like, to the point that it's going to take some time to make heads or tails of how these classes are meant to be played. In some way, they almost felt like a new job. So to Bard, Machinist, and Summoner mains, you got a drastic rework. And so, you know, go in with an open mind. You know, not all change is bad. And just know that, like, if that job is no longer the job that best fits you, that other jobs got drastic changes too. So maybe you don't like Bard anymore, and you do like Machinist, or maybe you like Dancer. And so definitely I can see where there's some big shifting going on there that's going to make people kind of question which ones they like. And so if you are one of those jobs in the next 4 weeks, if you say have like your Summoner at 50 and you're you know, you're thinking that that might be an interesting job to you, but it's not yet, it might be worth kind of spending a little time leveling that up, just to kind of have those jobs waiting in the wings, just because it would be worth kind of just trying that out. I don't think any of them were bad. I just think they were drastically different enough that if you were looking for a very taste-specific experience from this game, that yours may have been shifted. So hopefully this all makes sense. I know this was a lot to go over, and it was a great chance to show off some visuals and things like that. So if you have any questions down below, I would love to kind of elaborate on all this more. This is just kind of the other side to what I would normally present in a live letter, where I just wanted to kind of talk a little beyond just the bullet points that were in there. I wish that I could go back and capture my actual emotions during all this, having gone through the live letter basically twice this time around, because I really was so excited. Just multiple times I was just giddy with excitement. If you haven't watched Larry Czar's video of the actual reactions in the room, I don't even know that it fully captures how exciting it was, but we had basically the staff were sitting around us, and we were in this set of chairs in front of a projector, and they were just smiling and watching our reactions as we were cheering, and people were jumping up and down, and there was definitely some profanities being let out, and at how awesome things were. And so I think across the board there was a lot of excitement, and I think that it's because the effort they put in and the direction the game is going shows. They really seem to be listening to us, and while, you know, Brian and I have had some critiques over the years that we played this game, not all of them can be addressed immediately upon an expansion. Some of it takes context. I think that, you know, at least from my perspective, everything that I want to see them doing, they're taking steps in those directions, with the exception of kind of tank changes. And for anything else to further cement the game, I would just need to see this line of thought continue through 5.1, 2, 3, and so on. Because, you know, I also have some questions about things like, how do you do relic design? How do you support replayability over the course of an expansion? Of course, the dungeons feel good when they're brand new, but what do you do to make dungeons feel good when everybody's already capped all the jobs that they want to do, and they're already capped on tomes for the week? Those are things that we're just going to have to see addressed over time. There isn't any way they can answer them verbally. It just takes time to see how that feels. So my name's Chris with Work to Game. Have a fantastic day, and I'll see you next time.
You guys ever wondered what's behind me? Let's go ahead and take a look. There's some Warhammer and gaming stuff. There's some German beer steins. There's a rainbow ball shooting out of his face unicorn, some Star Wars toys, some different architecture projects, some Work to Game mugs, one with a chocobo on it, some Jeeps, and then my face, and then the first skyscraper I worked on in my first job out of college. So, yeah.